What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you part 2 of our story series for Pathfinder Kingmaker. Just as a reminder, we are only really focused on the main story. We're not covering a ton of side content unless it specifically relates to the main story in some way. And I'm not really going over the companions too much, again, except for the moments where the companions are tied to the main story. Last we left off, we had just liberated a portion of the stolen lands from the Stag Lord, and we needed to report back to Jamandi about our success. So we can speak to Oleg whenever we are ready to do that, and then it will teleport us back to Jamandi's mansion where we started the game at. We find ourselves in a small room where we can speak to Jamandi, and she will explain more of the political situation that I've already explained to you in part 1 of this series, so we won't go over it again. And she'll tell you that when she's giving you this barony, she's going to assign you an envoy, which is her adopted son, Kasil Aldori. Then we find ourselves in a banquet hall enjoying the feast and celebration. What we need to do here is speak to guests. This is actually pretty interesting because we can meet some people of note. There is Lander Lebeda, I think his name is, as well as a woman from House Sertova, which is the Aldori Sword Lord's rivals. Natalia is the head, Sertova person, and then she suggests maybe instead of taking Kasil as an envoy with you, perhaps you should take on her envoy, Chandra, instead. And she subtly implies that, your nation might not last so long under amicable terms with the Sword Lords. Again, just exploring more of that political strife I've already explained. Lander is another envoy you could potentially take if you so choose. You can also speak to Magar Varn, who actually conquered Varnhold, which you can relive through the DLC Varnhold's Lot. Varnhold is the area directly next to the area you took in the Stolen Lands, and we will actually talk more about that in a later episode. We can also talk to one Hannes Dreliv, who is the third person that was actually sent to the Stolen Lands, who's supposed to be taking over the area of Glenabon. We can also find Kayesi again, which is the tiefling from the prologue of the game, who decided not to follow ourselves or Tartusio into the Stolen Lands, but rather stick around Restov. She will approach us explaining that she has found word of a treasure that resides in the lands you are about to take over. So once the ceremony's over, she asks you to meet her in your capital, or what will be your capital, and talk to her about it, which is how you can take her on as a companion, provided you have the appropriate DLC to do so. Now, when you're ready and you've spoken to all these people, we can go talk to Jamandi at the front of the feast hall and begin the ceremony. Now, this is where we earn the title of Baron and are formally granted our barony to start dealing with. Now, it is right at this moment, right before this actually, you can talk to Jamandi and basically demand a different envoy. You can take her adopted son, which is the default option. You can take Lander Lebeda, or you can take Chandra. Now, truthfully, the first option is actually the best option. The adopted son of Jamandi is actually probably the best person to take. Slight spoiler warning for future episodes, but if you take the other two, they wind up leaving you high and dry later in the game. One of them will come back to help you later, but honestly, I don't recommend it. You're probably just better off taking Kasil, or Castle, however you pronounce that guy's name. Now, after this, the game jumps forward about 6 months or so, and you arrive in your new capital. You will be greeted by Keston, the head of the guard for Jamandi, who has now been assigned to help you in addition to Kasil. And he will give you a tour of the capital, kind of explaining what things are, where things are. He'll also explain that this capital has actually been established in place of the Stag Lord's old fort. So where that fort was is our new capital. He can also explain that all of the companions we've picked up to this point are in town somewhere. And then right after our tour, we get an explanation on kingdom management. Now, for the sake of this playthrough, we are going to have it set on automatic simply because it's not really related to the main story that much. But typically speaking, during the game, you would actually have to manage your own kingdom. I give a bit more information on that in my review after 100% of this game if you're interested. But suffice to say, we're not really going to talk about kingdom management outside of how it relates to the main story. Now, after this, we will be greeted by Jod and Tristan. They will explain to us that following the desecration of the Temple of the Elk, there seems to be a spot nearby the capital where a similar magic feels like it's at play. Basically, the area around there seems to be cursed. So, we're going to talk about this curse for a second, simply because this is important. So, the ancient curse is a 7-part quest. I'm explaining it this way because what the actual ancient curse is a time gate. So essentially, during each chapter of the game, prior to the last few chapters, which happen one right after the other, during most of the chapters of the game, you'll get an ancient curse phase, where basically you're given an allotted amount of time, usually like 6 months to a year of in-game days, where the curse will be building in power. And then at the end of that time, the curse will come to fruition. You'll have to head to a certain area to fend off the initial attack wave, as well as do a kingdom management event to curb the curse, and then it begins the next phase after that. Now, each phase, typically speaking, outside of like one or two exceptions, falls in line with the chapters of the game. Essentially, the in-game chapters are timed by this curse. You have so much time to complete them, or your game fails because you didn't address the problem and it grew in so much power, it essentially took over your barony, is kind of the thinking there. So basically, just know that the Ancient Curse is a timer on the game. Now, after this, we can exit the throne room, where we will be met by the nymph who was guiding us through Chapter 1, and she will ask us to meet her alone at a location called Verdant Chambers. There is a lot of foreshadowing that, like, maybe this isn't a good idea. The journal's like, I don't know that this is a good idea, like even stuff like that, because the journal is written as our companion Lindsay's voice or whatever. So there's a lot of foreshadowing. Now, surprise, surprise, when you go there alone, because it won't trigger otherwise, but once you go there alone, the Guardian of the Bloom, the nymph that's been helping us, actually betrays and ambushes us. We don't get much explanation for this at the time, simply that clearly she needed our help getting rid of the Stag Lord and then tried to kill us immediately afterwards. Now, as an encounter, I actually kind of hate this. So you're alone, she'll summon a bunch of very high-level monsters to confront you, in an effort to kill you, obviously, and you're by yourself. This is an encounter where you're basically just trying to escape. You're not trying to fight or kill these monsters, because realistically, while it is technically possible, it would be incredibly difficult and require a lot of save scum and lucky dice rolls. Now, the annoying part about this is that escaping this encounter is actually heavily favored towards martial characters, basically anyone with a high athletics or a high mobility skill. Because when you click on this tree in the middle of the area, she's going to start the ambush. And ideally what you want to do is pass the athletics check behind you, scale the wall, follow the wall down to a mobility check, which will then lead you to an exit map, and you'll only have to fight like maybe one monster. The problem with this is, if your character is not spec'd for the incredibly high athletics check climbing the wall behind you requires at the time, it is a 22 requirement athletics check, which means you need a 22 dice roll to actually pass it. So, your 1 through 20 dice roll and then modifiers to bring you up to 22, which at this point in the game is a fairly decently high skill check. And again, most martial characters should be able to pass this at the time. The problem is if you're paying like a caster or a ranged character who's probably not going to have that athletics check, that's going to be a real pain, because at that point, if you absolutely cannot pass this athletics check, what you have to do is use a potion of invisibility to sneak past all of the monsters and around the wall of the castle or whatever kind of structure it is here to get to that second mobility check. This encounter sucks. It's not impossible, it's just unnecessarily difficult, and I don't find it very balanced for characters, especially when they specifically send you there alone. I mean, I get that she's trying to kill you, but also it feels just unfair on any difficulty you are on. Now, around this time, we will have been given a 30-day countdown to the initial start of the Ancient Curse that I mentioned earlier. We have a couple weeks to start getting our bearings before things start happening with the actual next chapter that we find ourselves in. So after a couple of weeks, we will get reports of trolls causing trouble in our barony, and the chapter, Troll Trouble, will start. Now, you can actually go to the areas associated with troll trouble beforehand, but nothing will be started yet until you get that initial report in your throne room about trolls starting to attack your barony. Now, this usually happens with about a couple of weeks to go until the initial Ancient Curse, which again is a 30-day timer. So just keep in mind at some point you'll have to swing back around, do the Ancient Curse part, which will then give you like a 6-month timer to complete Troll Trouble in. Now, the first part of Troll Trouble, and keep in mind from here, all of these might not necessarily be in order because of the way the game plays and flows. I'm going to try to present it in a manner that makes the most sense, but keep in mind some of this stuff might not be in order specifically as it would happen. Now, very near to our capital, a ford at Skunk River, I believe the location is called, we can meet Jubilost and Tartuk. Remember, Tartuk is actually Tartusio's disguise from Act 1. But essentially, at this ford in the river, we can find a bunch of gnomes being assaulted by kobolds. And after the initial wave is fended off, Tartuk appears and attacks you guys again after he buffs some more kobolds to send at you. You can point out that he's supposed to be Tartusio. He gets angry and just, buffs the kobolds and sends them at you and then nopes out and leaves. Now, at this point, we can speak to the gnome known as Jubilost, who can be our companion after this. So, what we need to do here, we can either have him join us right now, or we are forced to wait until later, because his cart is slowly getting, swept down river, so you need to save his cart. If you fail the text event associated with that, he will not join you until you discover the lair of the trolls. However, if you succeed in the text event, he'll join your party immediately. Truthfully, it doesn't really matter. He is my least favorite companion, but he has a quest where you need to take him to where the troll lair is. So, if you get him to join you immediately, it just kind of helps that be a little less annoying. I should probably mention that once we get that initial report of trolls, our real goal for Troll Trouble is to investigate what is going on with these trolls, where they are coming from, and how we can get them to stop attacking our barony. Now, the ultimate actual goal of this is to simply find their lair and take out their leader. But we have to find all of the relevant information first. Now, at some point, we will get a random encounter with a man named Dalton. After we save Dalton's life from trolls, he will explain that, for whatever reason, some of these trolls don't seem to be afraid of fire at all. Because normally, what kills a troll is fire and acid in Pathfinder. You actually do have to use a fire or acid spell to officially put a troll down. They will not be completely dead until you do so. You can knock them to the ground, but they will eventually get back up unless you actually use fire or acid to kill them. Now, Dalton will explain that this is very odd, of course, and that you should go check on a mage who lives nearby who studies trolls. This will give us access to the lone house, where we can go and find a bunch of bandits in the woods. We can kill them, where we can eventually find our way to a house where we can meet Bartholomew Delgado. Bartholomew is a mage, and he is out here studying trolls, because he is trying to use their regenerative properties and, use them on humans so they would maybe have the same properties. Now, we quickly learn, if we're following this, that he's an unsavory guy. He's doing this by absolutely mutilating a troll named Dimwit. However, from Delgado, we can also learn that the reason some of these trolls are resistant to fire is because they are having a fire resist spell branded onto their skin. Now, we can either tell Bartholomew to cut out the experiments here, or we can let him continue. If you force him to stop the experiments, he'll no longer talk to you, and you lose him as a potential advisor, which I'll get into a little bit later. Now, the next place we can explore is the ruined watchtower. This is where we can find another potential companion, Ekundayo. So Ekundayo was a carpenter in a village before his family and the entire village besides him was killed by trolls. So he's been tracking them and, slowly hunting them all down. He has a bunch of leads as to where you can find trolls in the area. And more importantly, he has a quest where he wants to kill a very specific troll, a rock troll to be specific, named Kargad. Now, unlike the trolls you've been facing up to this point, Kargad is a rock troll, which means he is not able to be out in sunlight without, petrifying. Now, once we've recruited Ekundayo, and we have his leads that he can give us, we can track those leads down. 2 of them, we can learn a bit more about the trolls, and one of them is actually the location of the troll lair, which normally you wouldn't know, but we're getting to that. The 2 that are not the troll lair, we can learn that the kobolds are being treated as equals to trolls, that kobolds and trolls seem to be helping each other. And moreover, we can find a group of kobolds looking to go find Tartuk, which we know as Tartusio. And we can point them in the right direction, we can kill them outright, we can kind of do whatever, but we learn some things from this conversation, then we can go on our way. The other thing we can learn is simply the name of the leader of the trolls, Hergulka. Hergulka is the person all of these trolls are rallying around, which truthfully by itself isn't that useful information because we'll have learned that regardless. But at this point, the only thing left to do really is actually go to the Dwarven ruins, which is the subject of harem side quest you'll have been given up to this point already. It is also where Jubilost would like to go, and it is also where Kargad is that we can kill for Ekundayo. However, before you go to the troll place, I would actually recommend waiting a little while, because after we visit the mage at the lone house for the first time, if we wait a little while, we can get a follow-up quest in our throne room, where essentially the troll attacks have increased in pace, and specifically they seem to be trying to get to the lone house and attack Bartholomew for whatever reason. So you are sent there to check up on the mage a second time. Now this time when we go there, we find all of his house and things under attack by trolls trying to kill the guy. So if we get to him, we ideally need to save him from the trolls. However, I will mention that on any of the higher difficulties, that is pretty difficult to do. If his health drops all the way down, you can't save him. He won't die immediately. You will get to talk to him after the fight. But if his health hits 0 here, then it's done. Ideally, you want to save him, but we'll get to that. So kill the trolls, including Dimwit, who have turned on Bartholomew and have attacked him. Now, once you talk to him, if he is alive or if he's dying, he will give you the same quest called a guiding beacon, which will then reveal the location of the troll lair if you haven't already found it yet. But again, if you talk to Ekundayo, one of his leads is the troll lair. So ideally, you would have already found this out. A guiding beacon can also give you the location. In addition to this, in addition to asking us to go find an item that was stolen by the trolls and taken to this lair, which is how he's able to tell you the location of the lair to begin with, if you do that quest successfully and then report back to Bartholomew, he can potentially be one of your advisors if you recruit him to your court. That is important because those instances throughout the game are very rare. Most of your advisors are your companions. So having advisors that aren't your companions there's only like maybe a handful of them throughout the game, let alone ones you can actually recruit. So if you can stomach the fact that this guy is clearly a bit of a sycophant who is experimenting and mutilating trolls, by all means, recruit him to your circle. Now, it's worth mentioning, real quick, before we get to the last part of this video, that while he might be doing unsavory things to trolls, you need to understand that in Pathfinder, trolls eat humans. That is what they do. We are like their number one food source. If they can eat anything, ideally it's us. So keep in mind, all that mutilation isn't wholly unfounded. But, it's still not a great thing to be doing. Now, when we're ready, we can set off to the Dwarven ruins. Now, once we get there, we quickly discover that this is in fact the lair of the trolls. The trolls themselves are calling this Trobold, which we can learn from the first troll we meet along the path, named Jazan. Now, we can get quite a bit from Jazan, so we can attack him outright if we want, yes, but if we take the time to talk to him, we find out that Tartuk has actually been teaching these trolls Common, which is why Jazan is actually so fluent in it and can talk to us basically as well as a normal human or, sentient being would talk to us. Now, more importantly, Jazan is about as civil as a troll gets. So, if you are playing a lawful character, you can use a required lawful choice to get brought to the inside of the keep and skip the outside portion of this area, which essentially lets you skip a whole map and will save you a lot of time if you have the lawful alignment required to use it. In addition, we are going to meet Jazan later in this dungeon, and as we used this lawful alignment choice, we can actually spare his life and he'll just leave. But either way, once we get inside the keep, we will meet Hergulka at the entrance. He will explain that the reason the trolls have grown so bold and everything lately is that Tartuk met Hergulka and was the first to brand him with this fire resist spell, making them stronger, and then Tartuk took the time to basically teach them. So these trolls have become a real threat to, regular villages and stuff. That said, Hergulka will run away from this initial meeting to retreat into his lair to prepare to fight you, which is where we have to start making our way through the dungeon. Now, if we go left of the initial entrance is where we can find Kargad, where we can resolve Ekundayo's quest one way or the other. Ideally, you want to have him with you, but even if you don't, killing Kargad does resolve that part of the quest. Now, after this, we just have to make our way through the dungeon and find Hergulka and Tartuk's lair. Now, there is a lot of good treasure around the Dwarven ruins. Not really the focus of this video, but that dungeon is definitely worth actually exploring and finding everything, because you get a lot of very good loot from this place. Now, once we make our way to the very end of the dungeon, we find Hergulka, Tartuk, and a Dwarven anvil that is obviously magical in nature. So it becomes quickly apparent that Tartuk found this Dwarven anvil and was using its magic to brand the trolls, which is where they were getting their fire resistance from. And coincidentally, it is this anvil right here that is the subject of Harem's quest and why he wanted to go to the Dwarven ruins to begin with, so that's just a side note. And speaking of Jubilost's quest, you literally just have to bring him to the outside portion of the Dwarven ruins, and then that's it. That quest resolves itself. It seemed a little pointless to me, but nonetheless, that is how you finish that one. Now, when you meet Hergolka and Tartuk, this can go a lot of ways. Now, you're going to wind up fighting Hergolka here, pretty much guaranteed, but again, this can go a lot of ways, so let me explain. You can use a required evil choice to have Hergolka kill Tartuk, and basically explain that, Tartuk was using him, which actually isn't true, but you can use that evil alignment choice to have Hergolka kill Tartuk, and then you just have to fight Hergolka. But assuming you don't use that choice, you're going to need to fight Tartuk and Hergolka. Depending on which one you kill first, it matters if you actually killed both of them. And if you just kill Hergolka, then, he's the kind of the default choice. But the one you kill first matters, because the one you kill first will actually die in this fight. And then once you get the other one to a low health, they will stop to talk to you. Both of them can then be recruited if you have a chaotic alignment. You can actually vassalize the trolls or the kobolds. Ideally, you want to pick Tartuk, honestly. The trolls aren't going to help you out that much. Tartuk will explain that when he was resurrected from being Tartusio, under the old sycamore as part of part 1, it seems to have fully transformed him into the kobold disguise he was wearing. So what was initially an illusion became his actual appearance, because when he was raised as one, it appears to have cursed him in some manner. There is a very difficult to get ending to this game where that is required knowledge. You have to pick that up, that Tartuk was cursed in some way. Basically just any and everything you can learn about curses. But we'll get into more of that at the appropriate time. Now, regardless of whether or not you have the chaotic alignment required to recruit these two as vassals to your barony, you can choose to just let them go. Now, with Hergolka, you won't see him again anymore. Or her, I don't really know. If you choose to let Tartuk go, you will see him again at the very, very end of the game, regardless of whether or not you could recruit him. And that, once that situation is resolved, ends the threat of trolls to your barony, which concludes the Chapter 2 portion of the actual main story of this game. However, ideally you want to do this as quickly as possible, because this will give you the rest of the Ancient Curse timer on part 2 of it to go explore and fill out your barony. That is a running theme. As that is mostly side content, we're not really going to focus on it, and our next portion of these videos will pick up where the Ancient Curse ends for part 2 and begins chapter 3, which will be called Season of Bloom. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching. I truly enjoy and love making these videos, so if anybody gets anything out of them, it means a lot to me. Can't thank you guys enough for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.